beautiful people out there, how y'all doing today? That is fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Diesel Sports Podcast, where we talk everything National Football League, in season, off season. It doesn't matter, because football is football at the end of the day. Like I said, I am your host, Double Diesel. Welcome to the show. Before we continue, I would ask kindly, if you enjoy the content, please like, subscribe, and share the video. It helps boost us and exposure, helps us throughout the algorithm. That'd be greatly appreciated. And also comment as well if you like some feedback or just to give your opinions on things we talk about here in the show. Also, if you haven't already, go follow me at DDS_pod on Twitter. And also, go help me out, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. On there, you will get exclusive content such as my weekly picks, as well as my draft content in the off season, etc., etc. And also, you can also just help me out on Patreon just to help me out and help support the channel. It helps keep this going and helps put food in my belly. So if you would do that very kindly, if you would like, that'd be greatly appreciated. Or you don't have to. I mean, you don't really have to do any of those things. You taking the time out of your day to watch this means the absolute world to me. So thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, share if you want to. Or you don't have to. You can just sit back, relax, and listen to the show. With that being said, let's go on with the show. Week 4 of the National Football League season is officially in the books. There's quite a few storylines to talk about. And I also, towards the end of the show, want to give my quarterly awards for the first 4 weeks in the National Football League season. Offensive MVP, defensive MVP, etc. Along with English, along with a couple of my own personal awards that I created. But there's a couple games from week 4 that I wanted to dive into. I know we started out all enthusiastic, but the first game, I just wanted to get this out of the way because it's not very enthusiastic to talk about. I'm, of course, talking about the Thursday Night Football game. The Miami Dolphins heading to Cincinnati to take on the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals ended up winning this game 27-15, but that is not really the talking point coming out of this game. In fact, no one's really talking about the game itself. Everyone's talking about a circumstance that happened in the game. Now, heading into this week, there was a lot of speculation on what exactly happened to Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. It was very clear in the game last week against Buffalo, where he took a hit at some point late in the first half, and he got hit. It looked like the back of his head hit the turf, and we knew something was wrong with him because he got up, he was stumbling around, he didn't look like he was completely there. They brought him into the locker room to evaluate him. And we were all kind of shocked when Tua actually not only came back in the game, but he was back in the game by the start of the second half. And you would think, okay, he just got a little doozy. Maybe this wasn't something that serious, especially considering how serious the NFL takes concussions nowadays. You wouldn't think that something was significant enough to not put him back in the game. But the NFLPA didn't think so, and they were investigating the situation of was the concussion protocol properly used in this situation. Because you just watch him stumbling around, and they reported it after the game, the Miami Dolphins did, as it was just, and Tua himself said it was just a back issue. It wasn't a head injury. And not a whole lot of people, myself included a little bit, entirely believed that. Because I don't know if you've ever had back issues before, especially lower back issues, which is what they said it was. You can't really move all that much. You can't really stand up or even sit up that well. And just based on the way he was stumbling around, it's like, okay, something is wrong with him. It has to be a concussion or some kind of head injury. It doesn't make sense that it wouldn't be. So there was that fear going into the game of, should he be playing? Should he even be suited up for this game? And I don't know if this was a correlation to last week, but based on the talk coming into this week, this was the worst case scenario. At some point, I forgot what quarter it was specifically. My apologies for not writing that down. Tua was on a bootleg to his left. It was a play action bootleg. He was running to his left. The defensive tackle, I want to say it was BJ Hill, came up, not only sacked Tua, but wrapped him around his waist and threw him to the ground, and Tua's head hit the turf hard. And it looked like a brutal sack in the moment, and then it went from, oh, what a sack, to, oh my God, this is scary, because the camera pans, and I don't even want to do it, but I don't know if you saw it, but you saw he was all stiffed up and his fingers were, I've seen players who got knocked out and their arms just go straight up into the air. Doctors have said, you do that because it's like a defense mechanism, essentially. It's involuntary, and it's a defense mechanism that the body just naturally does when it's knocked out like that. But I've never seen the fingers get contorted in the way that Tua's were. And that was scary. For a second, I legitimately felt like he might have been paralyzed slightly, because I'd never seen something like that before. Eventually, it takes them a long time to get the ambulance out. They put him on a stretcher. Thankfully, after the game, they took him to a nearby Cincinnati hospital, and they said that he has all of his extremities and was able to fly back with the team. But this is a shitstorm for the almighty Shield. This is a PR nightmare, considering what the talk was leading into the game of, should he even be playing, to now it's like, what do you do now? The reports have since come out that the neurotrauma physician that evaluated Tua in the Buffalo game has since been fired. To me, that's not enough. I don't know. I mean, it is the Miami Dolphins. We've known over the offseason just how shady of an organization this is. So I don't know if it's just a Miami thing. But the NFLPA and the NFL have since said they're working together to basically reevaluate the concussion protocol and see how they can improve upon it to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Now, granted, the concussion protocol that was in place is much better than it has been in decades past. I mean, in the 80s and 90s, they didn't even have a concussion protocol, really. Like, a guy gets a concussion and the team doctors are like, hey, are you okay? And all the player has to do is say, yeah, I'm good. They could be completely lying. They can know they have a concussion, but they would just lie and say, no, I'm good. And the doctors would be like, okay. And they just put him back in the game. Now, because of the knowledge of CTE and what concussions can do, this protocol has been put in place and been strictly enforced to make sure that something like this doesn't happen. That a player's health and safety is not put at risk just for a slight advantage in a football game. And as we've seen this past week, again, it might just be the Miami Dolphins. It might just have been that physician who might have been under pressure by whoever to be like, hey, he's our quarterback. We need him in the game. I don't know. I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's just the protocol in general. But they are going to look at it and evaluate it and reconstruct it. But this is a scary, scary situation. You don't ever want to see something like this happen. And I just hope for the best for Tua. I hope he makes a speed. I've been really hard on him in the past. Even this year, I've been kind of hard on him, despite him looking really good at times. Um, but yeah, this is a terrifying situation. I don't ever want to see that happen again. I don't ever want to see a player laying on the ground and me having the thought that he might be paralyzed. I don't ever want to watch a football game, watch the sport that I love to death, and see something like that. I know something like that is possible of happening, but I don't want to see it. I want the league to make sure that something is in place to keep stuff like that from happening. And they've done everything they can to keep stuff like that from happening. And it's a full contact sport. Shit's bound to happen at times. You can't completely take it out of the game. It's impossible to take that completely out of the game. But yeah, it's a scary situation. Luckily, like I said, Tua appears to be fine. But if it's up to me, and I think the Miami Dolphins are now in agreement, he's not going to be playing for a while. Even when concussion symptoms that he has, it has been reported as it's just a concussion. Um, but yeah, he should not be playing for the foreseeable future until we are sure and certain that he is entirely healthy enough, both physically and mentally, to play a National Football League game. I just wanted to get that out of the way early. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about it. And yeah, man, it's a terrifying situation that luckily isn't worse than what we initially thought it was. But yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way. Now let's go back to some joyful things to talk about to boost the spirit a little bit. First game that I want to boost our spirits a little bit is a battle of young quarterbacks. Two of which making their season debuts. One was planned before the game and the other wasn't, though it should have been. That is the New York Jets against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Zach Wilson. Those of you who are on Patreon, again, follow me on patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. Those of you who saw my weekly picks on Patreon, I said in those picks that this game really depends on what version of Zach Wilson we're getting. This was his season debut. Didn't play the first 3 games because of the knee injury he suffered in the preseason. It's because of him that we suffered through 3 weeks of Joe Flacco. But I said in that this game depends on what version of Zach Wilson we're getting. Are we getting early rookie season Zach Wilson, who looks panicked and is trying to do too much and doesn't really know what to do, the game's too fast for him? Or are we going to get late season rookie Zach Wilson, where you started to see him getting a little more comfortable and getting more accustomed to the speed of the game and the offense, etc.? And we didn't know what kind of Zach Wilson we were getting and what development he would show. And I know it's just the first game of the season, but he played really damn good. He was really, really friggin' good this week. And he was on time with a lot of throws. He made a lot of really great throws. He had a really nice throw that was, granted, it was slightly behind Corey Davis, but Corey Davis made it back and made a great catch on it. But that was still a really nice throw late in the game. He wasn't just running around for the sake of running around. He was stepping up in the pocket. He was bailing from the pocket when he needed to. He kept his eyes down the field, which is something you didn't see him do a lot in his rookie year. And yeah, man, he played really damn good and led the Jets on that game-winning drive late in the game. and he looked like a real NFL quarterback doing it. And as someone who was really high on Zach Wilson coming out of BYU, that was something I really really love to see, because coming out of 2021 and the 2021 draft, I said if not for Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson would be the for sure number one quarterback in that draft class. He was that good at BYU. And I will say, like, in his rookie year, it was disappointing to watch because I knew he was better than that. He obviously has the physical tools. He's a great athlete. But it was very disappointing to watch him not fully grasp it in his rookie year. But so far, granted, it's only his first start, but it was miles better than what he was in his rookie year. And that's great to see. I hope he can build upon that. I hope the Jets as a whole can build upon that, where you're like, all right, I'm hoping the goal with Zach Wilson is to, by season's end, know for sure if he's the guy. If you get to the end of the season and Zach Wilson has had like a bunch of up and down performances and you're not feeling great about it, like you're not feeling bad about it, but you're also not feeling great about it, that's when you start to worry of, okay, is he really the guy? Do we have to go after somebody else? But if you're going into the end of the year and, you don't have a winning record, but Zach was pretty consistent and he starts making some plays and he's grasping things more and more as the weeks go on, now that's when you're like, all right, for sure, we got our guy. That's how we know we have our guy. So, and first game of the year, this is basically their week one for the New York Jets, because I think every Jets fan, myself included, I'm not even a Jets fan, but I think every football fan just wants to forget about the 3 weeks of Joe Flacco to start the year. This was basically the New York Jets week one. And against a really good Steelers defense, minus TJ Watt, obviously, but still a decent Steelers defense for the most part. And yeah, man, this was a really, really good start to the season for Zach Wilson. I'm excited to see him build on it. I hope he builds on it, because if Zach Wilson can hit what I thought he could hit coming out of BYU, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. It really is. Another young quarterback that doesn't have as high of a ceiling as Zach Wilson, but was a guy that I thought should have been a starter by now. Ladies and gentlemen, Tiny Hands Kenny Pickett has entered the building. About damn time. For the life of me, I genuinely don't know what took Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers so long to finally put him in a game. It was evident after week 2 that Mitch Trubisky in this offense is terrible. That this offense was nothing with Mitch Trubisky in as the starting quarterback. And you saw it the second Kenny Pickett. Now, you could just say, like, all right, this is a rookie quarterback who, anytime a backup comes into a game, everyone's play elevates. Like, everyone, without even probably realizing it, once a backup quarterback comes in, everyone's like, all right, we got to up our game. We got to do everything we can now to pull this off. That could have been just what this was, or this genuinely could have been the second Kenny Pickett gets in. Now all of a sudden you have this new life to the offense. And you saw it. That stadium all of a sudden got electric when they saw that number 8 walk onto the field. And it was fun to see. He had 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns in that game. I think it was 2. He had only 10 pass attempts in the game. Not a single one of them hit the ground. Now, 7 of them were to his team, and the other 3 were to the opponent. But still, he went through the entire game without a single incomplete pass, essentially. So there's that. Now, he was thrown into action, and they had a chance late to win that game, but the Hail Mary was picked off. But Yeah, it's officially Kenny Pickett time. He's the guy going forward. If Mike Tomlin walks out next week, I got to look who they play next week. But if he walks out next game and Mitch Trubisky is the starting quarterback once again, then all hope is lost. I don't think that's going to happen. That'd be stupid if it does. But if that for some reason does happen, that Mitch Trubisky ends up going out as the starter next week or at any point for the rest of the year, that's that's concerning if Mitch Trubisky plays another snap of football for the rest of the year. I don't think that's going to happen though. I think they're finally giving the keys. They're finally giving the kid the keys to the Porsche, and just telling him, "Hey, just don't crash it," because we have a team that can compete for a playoff spot. Just from on paper, this team can compete for a playoff spot. Just don't crash it. That's all you got. Just you have the keys to the car. Just don't fucking crash it. And I don't think he's going to crash it. I think Kenny Pickett, coming out of Pittsburgh, he is... What you see is what you get from him. He's accurate despite his small hands. He's very accurate, and he's a really good athlete. The problem is I think he knows he's a good athlete because you saw it at Pitt a lot of times where he bailed from clean pockets constantly. And now, granted, I don't think he's going to bail from a clean pocket in Pittsburgh, at least for this year, because Pittsburgh's offensive line still isn't very good. But the whole point is to make sure, all right, is there something in Kenny Pickett for the rest of this year that we can build off of? Same with Zach Wilson, where is there something that if he can show consistently that he is the guy, that he can be the guy, then we know we have our guy. With Kenny Pickett, it's, all right, it's the same thing. Can he be consistent enough to where we have confidence with him going into next year? And yeah, that's basically all it comes down to. That's all I really want to talk about with this game. Zach Wilson looked great. Kenny Pickett looked good for the small amount of time we saw him. And yeah, hopefully Zach Wilson can keep this momentum going. And hopefully Kenny Pickett can show something that gives the Steelers fan base something to be excited about. Because these first 4 games, there wasn't really anything to be excited about. Which is understandable when you have Mitchell Trubisky as your quarterback, but just as a whole, there was nothing really about this Steelers team that there was really anything to get excited about, especially after TJ Watt went down with that pec injury. But now, all of a sudden, there's some energy here. Now, all of a sudden, there's like, okay, we have something to be hopeful about. So that's all I wanted to talk about as far as that game goes. Next game I wanted to talk about, the game of the week on paper, which ended up being the game of the week in my eyes. And that was Buffalo heading to Baltimore. In my opinion, 2 of the best teams in the NFL. Arguably the 2 best offenses in the NFL. Arguably. And this game was a tale of 2 halves. It was Baltimore dominating the first half. I think they were up 20-0 at one point, or 20-3 at some point. They were up, I think it was like 20-3, I want to say, going into halftime. And then the second half rolls around and the tide just completely shifted. It went from this is turning into a Baltimore route to Buffalo turning into Buffalo again and proceeding to score, what was it, like 17 unanswered points? Yeah, like Buffalo just went on a route in that second half. Not a route. It wasn't a blowout by any means, but Baltimore didn't score a single point in the entire second half of that game. And eventually the game was tied 20-20. And that led to the ending sequence, the one that everyone was talking about afterwards. And that is the Ravens were driving. They were driving. They got into a goal-to-go situation. Eventually, they burn through their first 3 downs. It's 4th and goal. And that's when the decision pops up of kicking the field goal with your Hall of Fame kicker with a chip shot. He can make that. Probably not even asleep. He could be dead and still make that. Or you could go for it, get a touchdown, and extend the lead to make sure Buffalo has to drive the length of the field to tie the game. And worst case scenario, if you don't get it, then Buffalo is backed up on their own too. So when Baltimore went out and went for it, initially, I didn't mind the decision. I know people are probably thinking like, oh, what a terrible decision. Initially, I didn't mind the decision of going for it because I understood the logic of, hey, if you get it, then they have to drive the length of the field. If they don't, hey, they're on their own 2-yard line. They have to go 98 yards or just like they have to drive a significant length of the field to get a game-winning field goal. So I understood what John Harbaugh was thinking. The problem was the execution of it. The problem was the execution. And the ball was snapped. Lamar was running around, tried to find something. He had actually Devin Duvernay in the corner of the end zone, wide ass open. And he was open for like a solid 3-4 seconds, just all by himself in the corner of the end zone. And Lamar saw him late. He threw the ball, and granted, when he threw the ball, Devin Duvernay was still relatively wide open. And everyone was saying, like, God, Lamar, you just got to throw away to make sure that it doesn't get picked and set Buffalo up at the 2. Instead, Lamar tried to force it to Duvernay, who he saw wide open late. And it ended up getting intercepted in the end zone by Jordan Poyer, which granted, everyone's saying, oh, Lamar, why would you throw that pass? Realistically, watching it back, watching the replay back, it was just a great play by Jordan Poyer. It was a fantastic, like Jordan Poyer, he had amazing closing speed on that. Because when Lamar threw that ball, yes, it was late, but Duvernay was still wide open. And I don't think he was anticipating Jordan Poyer to close the gap that fast. And it was just ultimately a great play by him. So I'm not going to shit on Lamar for that decision. He definitely should have saw him earlier, absolutely. And you know what? Hey, we're all sitting here like shitting on John Harbaugh and shitting on the Ravens for going for it in that situation. It's a New York Giants situation from week 1 where they decided to go for 2 to go ahead by 1, where it's like, hey, you make it, you look like geniuses. If you don't, you look like idiots. If Lamar would have saw Devin Duvernay earlier and completed it to him and gotten a touchdown, the Ravens look like geniuses. But it didn't. And instead, the worst case scenario happened where now, as opposed to, all right, if you don't get it, the Bills get the ball at their own 2. Because of the interception in the end zone, now all of a sudden Buffalo gets the ball at the 20, and you're giving the ball to Josh Allen with a couple timeouts and all this time with just a field goal to win the game. You're like, you just kind of felt the air go out of the building. You just kind of felt, well, this game's over. Because they have a great kicker in Tyler Bass. You have this offense that has been unstoppable the entire half. And you just kind of felt the game was over, and that's exactly what happened. They drive down the field. They milk every last second of clock possible. They actually got down to like the 2-yard line of Baltimore, and they just drained the clock to 3 seconds, kicked the field goal, won the game, walk off. And yeah, John Harbaugh was getting a lot of flack for that decision. Like I said, I understood why. It was just execution. If that play had gone differently, who knows what we would be talking about. Baltimore probably actually would have won that game. But the Baltimore Ravens, I mean, we're not going to talk about Buffalo because Buffalo, we know what they are. They're still, in my eyes, the best team in football. The issue is with Baltimore. This is the second time in 3 weeks now where they had a significant lead and significant double-digit lead, and they blew it and ended up losing the game. Second time in 3 weeks this has happened now. And it sucks because you know this team can be so great. And Lamar has just sort of been carrying this team on his back essentially at the start of the season. And it feels like the rest of the team is kind of inconsistent at times, where it's like the offense is on a roll and then the defense can't hang, and then the defense does their job and then some elements of the offense can't finish their job. And it's just frustrating because you know when they get it together, they are a damn good football team. And it's just been constant up and down. And it sucks because you know this team can really not just be a competitive team for a playoff spot, but you know this team can potentially, even with Lamar playing the way he's been playing, this team can compete for a Super Bowl legitimately. And it's just they need to work that kinks out. It's the first month of the season. The first month of the season's in the books. And you hope that they can get better at that as the season goes on. But as of right now, that's just been the story of the 2022 Ravens so far. They get up big, and then they still end up finding a way to lose the game because the team can't keep their foot on the gas, or the team is just inconsistent at a lot of different areas. Not even just throughout the season, but just like in game, they're inconsistent in game, and that's a recipe for losing games. But yeah, that's my main takeaway from the game. I know everyone was probably anticipating me saying like, "Oh, John Harbaugh, what the fuck was he thinking? What the hell is going on? Why would you go for that?" I understood why he did it. I understood the decision. It just didn't work out for them. Final game I want to talk about is I'll just start off by saying this. For those of you who are new, I am a New England Patriots fan. I've been a New England Patriots fan ever since I started being a football fan 10 years ago. And yeah, so I just want to give that disclaimer when I tell you that this was the most stressful game I've watched in a long ass time. Mainly because, so New England came into this game minus Mac Jones, their starting quarterback. And you just figured they went into this game with Brian Hoyer, who he's a veteran. He's been around for a long time. This is his, third stint in New England? But it's Brian friggin' Hoyer. It's Brian Hoyer. What you see is what you get, and it's not very exciting. It is next to nothing. And you figured going not only just against the Packers, but going into Lambeau Field, that this was going to be ugly, even despite Green Bay's offensive struggles. You knew that there was no shot in hell. I even said in my weekly picks, with Brian Hoyer as this team's quarterback, I can't imagine a world where they actually pull off the win. And then, after 2 drives, Brian Hoyer leaves the game with a concussion. And now we get to see third stringer, rookie Bailey Zappi. Is it Zap or Zappy? I think it's Zappy. And that's when all hope was lost. At that point, I was like, all right, I have zero expectations for the rest of this game. What I wasn't expecting, though, was not just the Packers' offense to be bad in that first half, but for Aaron Rodgers to be as bad as he was. He was missing a lot of throws. He was overthrowing guys. He had, I don't know what was going on with him in that first half, but he was not playing good football at all. He looked terrible in that first half. He had, obviously, the pick 6 right at the end of the first half to Jack Jones, which, hey, credit to Jack Jones. This was his first start. He played great in his first start. He was a guy that at the start of the year had a lot of hype around him in training camp, and that hype showing early, and that's something that I love to see. If there's one thing that Belichick knows how to do, it's drafting and developing late-round defensive backs. But this was a throw that I don't think Aaron Rodgers was anticipating him to make. It was an out route, and you would think now any quarterback would think, oh, just a simple out route, like a deep out against a rookie corner, that's easy pickings. And it was easy pickings, just just for Jack Jones. But yeah, I don't know what was up with Aaron Rodgers in that first half. He looked absolutely terrible. They were able to get it together in the second half of that game. And same with New England. They looked functional under Bailey Zappi. Now, they didn't ask him to throw that much. They just basically rode Ramondre Stevenson offensively, and they were able to move the ball with that, which is what I've been saying. They just need to rely on the run game more until at least the quarterbacks and receivers start doing some stuff. We already saw in the past couple weeks Devontae Parker's finally starting to catch on. He caught his first career touchdown in this game on a play that I will admit should have been called for a delay of game, but they were called for a delay of game earlier, like literally like the play before. So a part of me feels like that's just the refs sort of giving some leeway. But yeah, that touchdown should not have been on the board, but I'm not complaining. But yeah, the offenses for both teams, while not still looking particularly good, still were able to move the ball and do what they were able to do. And both defenses were up and down. They were not particularly good throughout the game. New England's defense, what you see is what you get. It's a Belichick defense. They're going to keep a team in it. But Green Bay, I don't know what the hell is going on with Green Bay as a defensive team. You would think that a team that loaded with talent on that side of the ball would just be putting the fear of God into every team they face. But no, every team, when they play against the Packers, are licking their chops because it's not because of the talent that they have. It's who's coaching that talent. It's they have a defensive coordinator situation that they play the most like watching the Packers defense is like watching a 12-year-old play Madden, where it's just cover 4 and basic cover 2 all the fucking time, and there's really no other diversity to it. And yeah, they just look anemic on defense at times, and any quarterback, whether it's Bailey Zappi or Mac Jones, any quarterback is going to look at that defense and what they were being given and think, oh yeah, this is light work. This is going to be this is going to be the easiest game I play in a long ass time, because their coverages and their defensive schemes are so vanilla, which you wouldn't expect considering the talent they have on the team and what the players they have on that team are good at. Like, perfect example, Quay Walker. Shouldn't have been a first round pick. I laughed hysterically when they took him in the first round at 22 overall, nonetheless. But the one thing he was good at Georgia was he was an excellent blitzer. And they rarely run blitzes. They have him out there constantly. And the one thing he does good, the only thing he does good really, is blitz the quarterback. And they don't have him blitz that much because the team as a whole doesn't blitz that much. So I don't know what's going on with that defense, but that they were basically the reason why this was a close game. Like, everyone's talking about like Bailey Zappi, and I was impressed by Bailey Zappi, the small sample size that he had. But that Packers defense was basically the reason why this was a close competitive game. There's no other way to say it. If that Packers defense lived up to what they are on paper, this would not have even been close. This would have not been a blowout because the Packers offensively still are not great. But they were the reason why this game probably even went to overtime. Which, yeah, this game went to overtime, by the way. Which, again, I was not anticipating. Like, I came into this week, when I tell you I came into this week with zero expectations, I meant I had zero expectations. And then when Bailey Zappi got in the game, I somehow even got negative expectations. As in, like, lower than zero, which I didn't think was possible. So, just the fact that that game even went to overtime, granted, Green Bay still ended up winning at the end on a last second field goal. It's it's still just like a what the hell was that situation where it's like it's weird because like both teams are I feel like coming out of this game, both teams are feeling the opposite of what the result is, meaning despite the loss, New England's coming out of this feeling pretty good because they were competitive in a game they shouldn't have been competitive in. And if you're Green Bay, despite winning the game, you're feeling like shit because you look at this and you're like, this was a Patriots team we should have steamrolled. We should have obliterated this team considering the circumstances they had coming into it. And they took us to overtime? Now, I've said like, hey, after like the usual script for the Packers season is they play like shit week 1 and then they eventually get things together in week 2 and then they turn into the Packers that we know throughout the rest of the year. Now, the first part of that script was right. They play like shit week 1. And we're just waiting for the second part of the script to kick in. The problem is, in years past, the second part of that script usually is kicked in by now. And it hasn't done that so far. Yes, they're winning games. Yes, they're 3-1. But this just doesn't look like a very good football team, which is not what you expect from a team quarterbacked by Aaron Rodgers and the talent they have on the defensive side of the ball. You would not expect this team, despite being 3-1 and tied for first place in their division, to look this lost. So, I don't know. They have a lot of stuff to figure out. And hopefully, for Packers fans' sake, they do soon. But, yeah, there's not, even though they got the win, and even though they're 3-1, I just don't feel like there's a ton of optimism around this team. Currently, that's just me. That's how it feels. But that's just a few of the games I wanted to talk about. Now I wanted to transition into, because we are at the end of the first 4 weeks of the season. We are end of the first full month of football. And after that, I want to talk about, I want to give out some awards through the first month of the season. I have 7 awards total. I will go in order. I have some regular awards that you usually see, as well as a couple of other personal awards that I created myself. And these are just some of the bigger things that I wanted to talk about as a whole. And yeah, let's just dive straight into it. And I want to first start off with the offensive MVP of the month. The offensive MVP of the month, to me, there was a couple candidates, but for the most part, I think, and this I feel like it will continue for the rest of the year, it's Lamar Jackson. He's been playing phenomenal. There were reports coming into the year that over the offseason he put on like 20 or 30 pounds, which didn't make a whole lot of sense at first because it's like, why would you take arguably the fastest man, one of the fastest players in the NFL, and make him add weight? But you've seen it in their offensive strategies of doing a lot of inverted option plays where instead of having Lamar break to the outside, you have him instead running into the C gaps a lot of the times, and you have him running into the middle of the defense on these inverted option plays, and with a 200-pound Lamar Jackson, you don't trust him to do that, run right into the middle of the front seven. But with a 230-pound Lamar Jackson, you can trust him to do that, to take that kind of beating. And it's showing dividends, and he's been playing his best football since that 2019 season. He is the reason why the Baltimore Ravens have still been in a lot of these games. He's the reason they have wins right now, period. Because the rest of the team, like I said earlier, has been so inconsistent. Yeah, there's really nothing else to say about him. He's phenomenal. If he keeps this up, it's hard to imagine why he wouldn't be the runaway MVP favorite. It's hard to imagine why he wouldn't be the runaway MVP favorite right now. He's just been playing lights out. He's been phenomenal. Defensive MVP, this was a little tougher as far as trying to find guys, because when you're talking about defensive players, you have to find guys that like stick out on the stat sheet. You can't really do that though sometimes with defensive players, because a lot of the times their impacts come from what doesn't show up on the stat sheet. But for this guy, the guy that I ended up giving this award to is he's a guy that both shows up on the stat line as well as you just see his impact in the game, and that's Micah Parsons. He's a freak of nature. He is the definition of a game wreck. We have quite a few game wreckers in the NFL. He might be the deadliest of them all. He's just been playing absolutely out of his mind for a Cowboys team that has a great pass rush as it is. That Cowboys defense has just been playing really phenomenal this year, and Micah Parsons has been the main catalyst behind why they've been so dominant as a defensive unit. I will have his stats here for a second, just to give you a rundown of what he's been so far. He is, through 4 games, has led the NFL in both sacks and pressures. Actually led the NFL in pressures per PFF, 22 pressures through the first 4 games of the season. A majority of linebackers or edge rushers in the NFL today usually get around 20 to 30 pressures in a season on average. He has 22 pressures through the first 4 games of the season, and 4 sacks on top of it. He's averaging a sack a game currently through the first month of the season. And the most impressive thing, he's not even a true edge rusher. He's an inside linebacker. He's an edge rusher who just so happens to be an inside backer. Because the way Dan Quinn uses him is so unique, and it's so amazing, because he's an inside backer who they have him blitz a lot. It's rare to have a middle linebacker who's just that good of a pass rusher, who's that dominant of a pass rusher. You imagine any other defensive coordinator, any level, NFL, college, you name it, would kill to have a guy like Micah Parsons, even just a guy who's just even a fraction of what Micah Parsons is as a football player. He's the real deal. He is as complete a defensive presence as you can get, and he's going to be a scary force in this league for a long time. And as a football fan, I love to see it. I love to see a guy, especially in an age where offense is so everything is catered to the offense, to see a guy that disruptive on the defensive side of the ball is just genuinely fun to see. Now, moving on to the Rookie of the Month. It was up in the air between 2 guys. Most people would say Chris Olave, who he's been phenomenal. I think he has like around 380 yards receiving this year. He's been great for the New Orleans Saints so far. But he's not the guy that I picked for this award. The guy I ended up picking for this award is a player on a team from a draft class that I criticized heavily, that a lot of people criticized heavily. And that player is Jacksonville Jaguars linebacker Devin Lloyd. Now, Devin Lloyd, I liked him coming out of Utah. I really did. I thought he was close to a complete linebacker, but I just didn't like the landing spot for him. I just didn't like the Jaguars offseason as a whole, despite the money they spent, despite the draft capital they had. And, there was a lot of things to criticize this team about. The paying the players they paid, the amount they paid them, spending the number one overall pick on Trayvon Walker, and, not really doing anything to help out Trevor Lawrence per se. And I thought this team was going to be a dumpster fire. But everything this team has done has really made me eat a pile of shit. Those players we were criticizing, like Christian Kirk has been amazing this year. Zay Jones has made a big impact. Trayvon Walker, the guy that I said should not have been anywhere close to being the number one overall pick, he's looked really good. And yet the best out of all of them, the one that I actually liked, is the best out of all of them. Shocker. Devin Lloyd, who he's been amazing. You would think, like, all right, on the stat line, it would be Aiden Hutchinson. Because, like, but Aiden Hutchinson has 3 sacks. Yeah, he got those 3 sacks in one game. Whereas Devin Lloyd, he's been an enforcer all 4 games that have been played this year. Excuse me of my lack of proper brain to mouth function. But yeah, Devin Lloyd, I have his stat line up here. He's been absolutely amazing. He has 38 tackles, 2 picks, 6 pass deflections, which is another thing that I really liked about Devin Lloyd coming out of Utah, was not only his impact as a tackler in the run game, obviously, but what really stood out about Devin Lloyd was his impact as a pass defender. He was much better as a pass defender than I thought he would be when I saw him play at Utah. What I mean by that is, you don't expect linebackers to be that good in pass coverage. And Devin Lloyd I'm not going to say he was perfect in pass coverage, but he was really damn good. And you see that in the first 4 games of this year, where I just said it. He has 6 pass deflections. He has a passer rating of 28.5 against him, which is insane for let alone a rookie linebacker. Especially considering, like, linebacker is, outside a corner, the hardest position for a rookie to play in the NFL, because the speed of the game is just so much different. And it's so much faster and everything's more physical. So it's very tough for a rookie linebacker to adapt in year 1. So the fact that Devin Lloyd has transitioned seamlessly from college to here and making an immediate impact now, it's impressive to watch. And usually, like, defensive players, like I said, the same thing with Micah Parsons, where it's rare for a defensive player to actually, like, stick out in today's NFL because of how everything is so heavily favored to the offense. So when a player does stick out on defense, it's fun to see. And Devin Lloyd has been one of those players that he sticks out, and it's fun to see him play. And I'm excited to see him moving forward. If he keeps this up, he's going to be a great player in this league for a long, long time. Now I'm going to move on to the breakout candidate of the year so far. Now, this one was up in the air between 2 players. And I'll just say who those 2 players are now. Those 2 players were Jalen Hurts and Tilaona Hufanga. Yeah, it was up in the air between those 2. Both have been absolutely phenomenal this year. And ultimately, just looking at it back and forth, I was just like, screw it. And I just gave it to both of them. I'll start with Jalen Hurts first. I was not expecting Jalen Hurts. I've said this in the podcast last week. I was not expecting Jalen Hurts to be this good. he's been close. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles as a whole, they are as close to a flawless team this year as you could possibly get. I can't find a single thing wrong with this football team, and it all starts with Jalen Hurts. Now, I'm not going to say he's among the elite quarterbacks. I'm not going to go that crazy. He's one breakout candidate for a reason. But yeah, he's been lights out. He's like I said last week, where he was at the start of his career at Alabama to where he is now, it's not even they don't even look like the same quarter. They don't even look like the same player. And Jalen Hurts, you saw even just from last year to this year, it's like there's been significant improvements in his game to where all of a sudden you now fear him when you're playing against him because he still has his threat as a runner, but now he's a legitimate threat as a passer because in his first 2 years he was a first read quarterback through and through. Where you would just see he would just look at his first read, and if it wasn't there, he would take off and run. Now he's going through his progressions, he's keeping his eyes down the field. When he's running around, he's running to extend plays. He's not just running to run. He's running to extend plays and keeping his eyes down the field. It's the Josh Allen development where his first 2 years, there's some obvious flaws in his game. And then in year 3, he takes this huge step up where all those flaws that he had those first 2 years, he actually worked on and improved. And now those aren't issues in his game anymore. And you're starting to see that with Jalen Hurts. And it's to the point where if Jalen Hurts keeps playing like this for the rest of the year, the Philadelphia Eagles might be a favorite to win the Super Bowl. Like, I know that might sound crazy. It definitely was crazy coming into the year, but he has been as perfect as you would want him to be playing at. Obviously, having guys like A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith help, and I think having A.J. Brown on the team has definitely upped his confidence to where he can be a little more like, all right, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. I don't know what I was, where I was going with that. But having Devonta Smith and now having A.J. Brown, I think has given him a little more confidence to not be that first-read quarterback. That's what I meant to say. And, yeah, man, he's been phenomenal. He was, honestly, I was close to giving him offensive MVP, but he is just, I can't give him that award over Lamar. But he's still been phenomenal. And for the recipient of this award, Talanoa Hufanga. Talk about coming out of fucking nowhere. Oh my God. Like, the hype train has officially left the station. And God damn it, I am full right. Like, this might just be me on the hype train. But he has been fantastic. Like, I noted after week 1 when the Niners played Chicago in that rain game, watching that game, I was watching it and I was like, hey, who's, this 29 guy Hufanga, he's been kind of all over the place, like he's having a really good game. And I was like, all right, it's probably just a first game. You don't know, but he looked really good in it. And then the weeks have gone on, and then this Monday night where he had a huge pick 6 in that game, and you're just watching this and like, oh my God, like it's not just a fluke. This guy's legit an animal. Like, you see it on Twitter, people calling him Baby Palomalu. And yes, most of it is because of the hair. It is mostly because of the hair. But also because I call him Baby Palomalu because, like Troy Polamalu, he's just all over the place. Where, like, he is involved in the tackle or the pile, it seems, every single snap. Like, every single play, he is involved in the play somehow, some way. And you haven't really seen a safety do something like that since Troy Polamalu. Or actually, no, since Cam Chancellor, really, like the last safety that I remember who was like every single play, he seemed to be involved in it, no matter what area of the field it was in. The last guy that was like that I saw was Cam Chancellor, who every single play you saw 31, just he was there causing havoc all the time. And through the first month of the season, Talona Hufanga, he's been everywhere. And the hype train is going, and I am proud to be on that hype train. And this might just be all the hype, but he's been absolutely phenomenal. He is the definition of a diamond in the rough, a guy that you come into the year, you don't think he's going to do much, and then he not only exceeds expectations, he shoots expectations through the roof. And he's been a joy to watch. And I'm just excited. I just love talking about him because he's so friggin' good. And yeah, man. I mean, the Niners defense as a whole has been extremely fun to watch. They've been an absolute wrecking unit. If D'Amico Ryans doesn't get head coaching consideration, then something is wrong. But this defense has been an absolute wrecking unit, and he's been arguably in the forefront of that outside of Warner and Bosa. He's arguably been the front man of that, and for good reason. He has been absolutely phenomenal. Now I want to get to my next award, the Pleasant Surprise Award. Honestly, Talona Hufanga was also a candidate for this, but, considering what we thought of him coming into the year, the recipient of this award, what we thought of him coming into the year versus what he is, it wasn't what I expected from him at all. And that player I'm talking about is Seahawks quarterback Geno Smith. Talk about a story. Here you have Geno Smith who, excuse me. You have Geno Smith who was a second round pick in 2013. Was originally hyped up as a first rounder coming out of West Virginia. Then you saw some flaws in his game that made him slip into the second round to the New York Jets. Started a couple seasons, was up and down at best. Didn't look particularly great during his time as a starter in New York. And his last full year as a starter was, I want to say, 2014. And since then, he's been a journeyman. Bounced around from team to team, has got a couple starts here and there. He was known also in New York as the guy that Ben McAdoo stupidly just randomly decided to start him over Eli Manning that one random week. But yeah, he had like one start for a couple starts for Seattle last year. And yeah, he was listed as the full-time starter coming into the year in a quarterback competition that had nobody excited. Everyone intrigued, but no one excited for him and Drew Lock. And Geno Smith ended up winning the job, and you're thinking, all right, who's the cleaner? Who's the cleaner turd of the two? You have two turds. You have turd number one in Geno and turd number two in Drew Lock, and it's like, you're picking between two bad apples here. Or at least so I thought. Because, hey man, Geno Smith has been fantastic. I was not expecting him to be this good. Now, when I say he's been good, like, you're thinking, all right, they're just like winning games and he just so happens to be the quarterback. Like, you're thinking, all right, he's a quarterback you're winning with, not because of. But you look at the numbers, Geno Smith is leading the NFL in completion percentage. Geno Smith is completing 77.3% of his passes. And this is a Geno Smith that his whole thing when he was the quarterback for the New York Jets was he would turn the football over constantly. Like, I remember back in, 2014, that there was a stat that said, like, this was back when Nick Foles was in Philadelphia the first time. And it was Nick Foles could throw, um, then Nick Foles could throw 50 consecutive incomplete passes and still have a higher passer rating than Geno Smith had in 2014. That's how bad Geno Smith was. And like I said, journeyman bounced all over the place. And you thought he was never going to get an opportunity again. And if he did, he was never going to really do much with it. But here he is. He's getting another opportunity to be a full-time starter. And he's taking that ball and running with it. And it's to the point where you're like, maybe, Seattle you thought was going to be in the Bryce Young sweepstakes. And now all of a sudden could this be Geno's team, not just moving forward for the rest of the year, obviously, but potentially beyond? He's been that good. And considering that Seattle's defense has not been good, the fact that they're still winning games and has been absolutely phenomenal. Now, a lot of that has to do with having DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett to throw the football to. That definitely does help. But Geno still has to do his part, and he's doing more than his part. And it's such a great story to look at, such a great thing to see. I'm so incredibly happy for him. A guy that's been through so much in his career has finally seemed to have found his stride, and it's such a nice thing to see. Another runner-up I had for this award was the Jacksonville Jaguars as a whole. I kind of touched on that earlier, how they weren't supposed to be as good as they are right now. But yeah, I just looked at Geno Smith. I was like, I can't not give this award to him. But now we take a little bit of a downer. These last two awards are kind of downers. It wouldn't be me if I didn't have a little bit of a rant. The first one is the biggest disappointment of the first month of the season. And this one was another tough one because there were quite a bit of candidates. And then I realized the candidates I was contemplating over just so happened to be in the same division. A division, no less, that everyone had a lot of hype about coming into the year. So as a result, I was just like, screw it. And I just gave the biggest disappointment award to the entirety of the AFC West. This was a division heading into the year that everyone was saying, hey, this is if outside of Buffalo, there's a chance that the representative of the AFC in the Super Bowl is coming out of the AFC West. Because on paper, this division was stacked. You had Kansas City, who's Kansas City. You had the Chargers, who had Herbert, and they added Khalil Mack, and Derwin James coming back fully healthy. They have Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler. You have Denver they got Russell Wilson in the offseason that added to a team that already had Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Tim Patrick, and Javonte Williams. And you also had the Raiders. They got Devontae Adams. You have Derek Carr. And now you have the best group of offensive talent in the league, arguably, with Adams and Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow. And a defense that had Max Crosby, who was a breakout player last year, who added Chandler Jones. This division on paper was loaded. It looked like it was going to be a bloodbath. In the first 4 games of the year, it's been everything but. I don't know what's going on, but this division is still Kansas City's throne to take. And I can't believe I'm saying this considering everything we thought about going into the year, but it doesn't look like anyone's going to knock them off of that throne. The Chargers maybe, but they've been riddled with injuries. It's been the running theme with the Chargers that they just can't seem to stay healthy. You got the Raiders, who before this weekend were the only 0-3 team in the NFL, and Josh McDaniels was on the hot seat, rightfully so. And then you had arguably the biggest disappointment of them all, the Denver Broncos, who hadn't scored 20 points in a game up until this past week. And you would think, all right, that's improvement. And then news comes out later that Javonte Williams tore his ACL and is now out for the rest of the season. and he was their most consistent offensive player. So, and Nathaniel Hackett has been hot seat candidate number 1, and this is his first campaign as a head coach. And yeah, it's sad, and it also almost doesn't make sense that that two teams really specifically, because when I talk about the AFC West as a whole, I'm more specifically talking about Denver and Las Vegas. Both those teams, at the talent they have, should not be this bad. They should not look this bad. And yet they do. It doesn't make sense to me. It does not compute. I don't understand it. For the life of me, it does not make sense. And it really comes down to both of these teams' biggest issues are coaching. You know, Josh McDaniels, who historically has not been a very good coach when he's been given the reins as the head man. Nathaniel Hackett, who's been exactly that, a hack. They're 2-2, but they have got to be probably the worst 2-2 team I've ever seen in my life. And I'd say that with zero exaggeration. They do not look like a very good, well-coached football team at all. And yeah, man, if you haven't already, I sort of posted a clip from last week's podcast about the Denver Broncos and their offensive woes. I'll put a link to that video down in the description below. Yeah, man, this is this is not a good football team. This is not a good football team at all. Neither of these teams are not very good football teams, which is something that I did not anticipate at all, considering the talent on this team. I'm not so much angry as I am just upset and just sad by it, because you know these teams could be so much better, but you know the reason why they're being held back. So that's all on that. Now I get to my final award, and it is the Dunce of the Month award. Basically, the biggest clown of the first month of the season. And, you know, it was really a head coaching battle here. I talked earlier about McDaniels and Hackett, and I thought for sure, like, most people would think, all right, it's going to be Nathaniel Hackett. He's been the biggest clown of the year so far, because of his ineptitude, apparently, of managing a game clock, so much so that he had to actually go out and hire a game clock manager to help him properly manage the game clock and the play clock. That's how bad it was. You would think he'd be the runaway favorite for this award. But after consideration, I have found out that there is a dunce bigger than him, and that is the man who, the only reason he is still a head coach in the National Football League is because his contract is that terrible, and that is Carolina Panthers head coach Matt Rule. Why in the ever-living shit is he still a head coach? His contract, that's literally the only reason. Like, if it were not for his contract, he would have been gone at the end of last year. The fact that after 4 games, he still has not even been close to being fired yet, or that David Tepper has not considered firing him yet, when it's clear as day that he is the liability for this team, it doesn't make sense. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch, because I want to see Baker succeed. I want to see Christian McCaffrey on a good team. I want to see DJ Moore be utilized properly. I want to see Brian Burns be utilized properly. I want to see this team be a good football team that I know it can be. But they're not allowed to be a good football team because Matt Rule is actively holding them back. It doesn't make sense how he's still an NFL head coach. Every sign in the world has pointed that to show that he is. I mean, he's not Urban Meyer bad. No one will ever be Urban Meyer bad. But he's not an NFL coach. Forget NFL head coach. He's not an NFL coach, period, I don't think. Like, you can give him a coordinator job. You can give him a positional job. I think he'll still be bad regardless. I don't think he's just not fit. He's not equipped to handle the NFL game, I don't think. And 3 years in, that's alarming to say. So, David Tepper, fire him. I don't know why you haven't already. It has to only be because of his contract, because I can't imagine any other situation that would actually explain why Matt Rule is still the head coach of the Carolina Panthers and why his ass was not fired after week 2. It doesn't make sense. It does not compute. It doesn't, I don't understand it at all. At all. I'm going to end it now before I blow my freaking lid. But yeah, Carolina, fire his ass. He should not be in this league anymore. He is a liability that is keeping talented players from being talented. But yeah, that is my awards for the first month of the season. And that brings an end to episode 2 of the Double Diesel Sports Podcast. If you liked the video, like I said at the beginning, please like, subscribe, and share the video to get this video out there if you enjoyed it. Again, go follow me on Twitter if you haven't already at DDS_pod. And again, if you haven't already, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports to support the channel. With that being said, I am Double Diesel.